Daily Food Series, Word, Life, and Edification, Part 2. Title of Book 1, Are You Willing to Change Your Life? By Pedro. Week 1, The Feast of the Tabernacles. Monday, The Protection of the Walls. Read with prayer. Then I said to them, You see the distress we're in, and how Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 17. Continuing on the general theme, the Gospel of John, Word, Life, and Edification. This week we will consider the topic, the Feast of the Tabernacles. John chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, and Leviticus chapter 23, verses 33 to 44. However, first, let us pay attention to some concepts taken from the book of Nehemiah regarding the reconstruction of the walls of Jerusalem. Imagine you want to build a beautiful house on a plot of land surrounded by adversaries. When planning construction, what would you build first? The house or the walls? This question was fundamental for the Jews who returned from exile and captivity imposed by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. After returning from captivity to Jerusalem, these Jews prioritized rebuilding the once destroyed temple without restoring the walls that protected the city. Thus, the adversaries entered and left the city when they wanted. The city God chose for his people as a center of worship at that time seemed to be a no man's land. It was desolate, destroyed, without government. Only rebuilding the wall could change the situation. What then is the relationship between the walls of Jerusalem and a feast? In the Bible, a feast represents rest, joy, and pleasure. Even though the temple was already restored, the environment in Jerusalem would never have been one of rest and pleasure for the Jews without the walls, which alone could provide them a place for government and safety. And what about us? Do you have walls protecting your inner being? Or is your heart a no man's land? What about your family? What about the church where you meet? Are you sure that God's government is there? Let us look at the passages in the Bible that tell us about this rebuilding. Nehemiah is a book that describes the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. King Nebuchadnezzar's army had destroyed the temple and the city, and some of the people had been taken captive to Babylon. After a while, the Babylonian Empire was overcome by the Persian Empire, and because of a biblical prophecy, the Persian king Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to Judea and rebuild the temple there. Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, and chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. For this reason, approximately 50,000 people returned, despite so many difficulties. In the year 516 BC, under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Joshua, the temple was restored, although less majestic than Solomon's first temple. Once the temple was restored, it was imagined that everything would return to normal and that everyone would be happy in their homeland. However, 71 years after the completion of the work of the temple, news reached Nehemiah that Jerusalem was abandoned and in ruins, showing that the vital need to rebuild the walls to reestablish God's government in that city. At that time, Nehemiah was cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes. Through his brother and other companions, he received the news that Jerusalem was in great misery and contempt, because its walls were broken down and its gates were burned. Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. This demonstrates that it's not enough to restore the temple without also rebuilding the walls that protect the city, because without the walls, a government cannot be established within its limits. Later, we'll see in a practical way how to build the walls in the spheres of our lives.